Numbers from Tesla's second quarter are historic, but not in the way a company would like. Tesla saw its biggest ever year-over-year decline in vehicle deliveries.
They're coming home. They're all coming home. And we want them to come home. They have to come home. We're going to treat them really well.
Ford's problems have seemingly accelerated. Before I came in, I was running down a list of all the Ford recalls so far this year.
If you're building in the United States or have committed to build, without question committed to build in the United States.
The warnings were there long before anyone paid attention. But nothing hit harder than the announcement that two of America's most iconic automakers, Ford and Tesla, were shifting major production to Canada. It didn't come as a soft press release or a quiet leak. It felt like a punch to the gut. A decision that sent shockwaves across the Midwest, the South, and every community built around the promise that American manufacturing would always come back. Instead, it's moving north. And the reason, ironically, is the very policy meant to protect American industry: tariffs. For months, Washington pushed the message that heavy tariffs would revive U.S. factories, bring back jobs, and punish foreign competitors. But as the numbers rolled in, another reality surfaced. Steel and aluminum prices climbed, battery components jumped. Imported machinery became more expensive, and for automakers already struggling with razor-thin margins, shifting regulatory rules, and a global EV price war, something finally broke. Moving production across the border became cheaper, safer, and more predictable than keeping it in America. It started quietly. Ford's first A memo circulated that a portion of its EV battery assembly and electric pickup production would relocate to Canada, citing rising material costs and supply chain pressures intensified by recent tariff adjustments. Then Tesla followed, not with hesitation but with speed, expanding its Ontario footprint and hinting that future model lines could be built entirely in Canada if tariff pressure continued. What once sounded unthinkable became a calculated business decision, and for many Americans watching their factories close, it felt like betrayal wrapped in economics. The truth is harsh. Tariffs didn't lower costs. They raised them. They didn't stimulate investment. They pushed it away. By trying to punish foreign competitors, the U.S. inadvertently punished its own automakers, especially those trying to stay competitive in a rapidly shifting electric vehicle market dominated by China's aggressive pricing. Ford's internal projections showed something alarming. The cost of building a mid-range EV truck in the U.S. had risen by nearly 18% in less than a year. A massive spike for an industry already under pressure. Tesla reported similar numbers privately to investors. Battery cells, raw metals, and structural components were suddenly more expensive to source inside the U.S., not because of market conditions alone, but because tariff layers had amplified supply chain bottlenecks. Across the border, Canada saw an opportunity and wasted no time acting. Federal and provincial governments rolled out new incentives, streamlined permitting, accelerated energy approvals, and offered attractive tax breaks for EV production. Electricity in many Canadian provinces is cheaper. Land is often easier to acquire. And critically, Canada positioned itself as a stable, tariff-resistant hub within North America. It wasn't a coincidence, it was strategy. And for companies like Ford and Tesla, the math became too loud to ignore. Canada's advantage grew even stronger when global battery suppliers began strengthening ties with Canadian mining firms. Lithium, nickel, cobalt, resources that power the EV boom, are increasingly sourced from Canadian mines or refined in Canadian facilities. So when the U.S. tariffs hit, automakers were effectively penalized for operating inside the country, but rewarded for moving north. It was the exact opposite of what policymakers intended. Back in the U.S., the fallout spread quickly. Towns that had spent decades building their identity around automotive manufacturing were suddenly facing closures or downsizing. Small suppliers, machine shops, plastics manufacturers, fabricators were left scrambling. Many couldn't relocate. Others couldn't survive the rising costs or the sudden loss of contracts. The job losses didn't hit headline numbers immediately. They trickled in quietly, plant by plant, department by department, week by week. But to families in Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, Kentucky, and Texas, the impact was instant. Local leaders expressed outrage. Governors demanded answers. Washington insisted the tariffs were necessary, but for the workers, the politics didn't matter. What mattered was the empty parking lot outside a once busy factory, the silence where machines used to echo, the fear of what comes next. Tesla's move also sparked a deeper geopolitical shift. For years, the US pushed to reduce its dependence on China's EV supply chain. And rightly so, China dominates global battery production, critical mineral refining, and mid-priced EV exports. But when tariffs made US-based production more expensive, Tesla looked for the fastest alternative that still allowed access to the American market. Canada became that door. And as Tesla expands its footprint there, so do its suppliers, Asian battery giants, European robotics companies, and renewable energy partners. Ford's move had a different tone. It wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Ford is woven into American identity. So when news broke that it was shifting operations to Canada, the symbolism overshadowed the spreadsheets. A century-old legacy of American manufacturing suddenly looked fragile. Ford insisted the decision wasn't about abandoning America, but about maintaining viability during unprecedented cost pressures. For many Americans, those words felt less like reassurance and more like a warning. Economists began sounding the alarm. Higher tariffs often lead to higher consumer prices. And for vehicles, even a modest increase can push families out of the market entirely. Early estimates show new car prices could rise another $1,200 to $1,800 within a year if supply chain expenses stay elevated. Used car prices could jump too, driven by scarcity and reduced production. Dealerships already feel the pressure. Inventory is tightening in some regions, shifting purchasing behavior at a time when Americans are already struggling with inflation. Canada, meanwhile, is experiencing a wave of optimism. Job openings are rising, EV manufacturing hubs are expanding, and foreign investors are pouring money into Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia. Instead of suffering from US protectionist policy, Canada has positioned itself as the beneficiary. It didn't have to compete with the US directly. It just had to offer stability, something multinational manufacturers crave when political uncertainty makes long-term planning difficult and the consequences don't end with cars. When major manufacturers relocate operations, supply chains follow. Engineers follow. Research facilities follow. Entire ecosystems follow. Once that infrastructure begins shifting, reversing it becomes incredibly difficult. And if the US continues down a tariff-heavy path, more companies may choose to leave instead of absorbing uncontrollable risk. Politicians on both sides of the spectrum are pointing fingers. Some argue tariffs are necessary to counter China's aggressive economic tactics. Others say tariffs only work with careful calibration, not sweeping measures that ignore downstream effects. Industry leaders are pleading for consistency, a regulatory environment where they can plan 10, 15, even 20 years ahead. But the truth is, global manufacturing is changing faster than policy frameworks can adapt. China's EV dominance is real. Europe's automotive struggles are real. Canada's rise as a North American battery and EV hub is real. And the US is stuck in the middle, trying to defend domestic industry with tools that sometimes cut deeper than intended. None of this means the US can't recover or adapt. It can. But recovery requires more than tariffs. It requires coordinated strategy, investment in domestic mining, refining, battery production, and innovation. It requires modernizing the grid, upgrading infrastructure, and forging smart partnerships instead of reactive policies. It requires understanding that protecting American jobs means more than raising barriers. It means building resilience. For the workers affected by these closures, the situation is heartbreaking. Many spent decades building careers on the belief that American manufacturing was on its way back. They were told reshoring was coming. They were told factories would reopen. They were told EV production would create a new American industrial boom. But instead, they watched the announcement that two of the most innovative automakers are leaving. Not for Asia, not for Europe, but for Canada, America's closest ally, and now its biggest industrial competitor in the clean energy race. This is more than economics. It's a wake-up call. A warning about the unpredictable consequences of policy decisions that aim to protect the nation but end up pushing opportunity away. A reminder that in a world tied together by supply chains, no country acts alone, even when it thinks it is. As Ford and Tesla expand their presence in Canada, Americans will feel the impact in many ways. Fewer local jobs, higher car prices, slower innovation, and deeper uncertainty about the future of manufacturing in the US. Canadians will feel it too, but in the opposite direction. New jobs, new factories, new investment, and a growing sense of industrial confidence. And as this shift continues, one truth becomes painfully clear. The line between protection and self-destruction is thinner than anyone realized. The hope now is that policymakers recognize it before more factories go dark. The cameras pull back and the hard truth settles in. These shifts aren't distant headlines. They're shaping the future of every worker, every family, and every town caught in the middle. The story isn't finished, and neither are we. Stay informed, stay aware, and stay ready for what comes next.